here today, and there is good reason for that. He became a father for the 4th time on Sunday and will return to Zebenerstrasse tomorrow. But that is why he's missing out on what today would have actually been his first ever public training session. So it is a shame that we are missing Bayern's new star striker. So if anyone is wondering where he is, and I'm sure that will be a statement made in the comments more than once today. But even if Harry Kane's not around, Bayern still have a star-studded ensemble for us to take in. Customary warm-ups are the first thing to take place. But it is a big season for Bayern ahead, and this is just the start of things to come for them. That 4-0 win against Werder Bremen. The goals courtesy of Leroy Sané, who bagged a brace. One in either half. Harry Kane, as mentioned, got on the score sheet. And Matthijs Tel chipping in with the 4th goal late on, as well as staking a claim for a few more minutes after what had been a very impressive pre-season for the Frenchman. Thomas Müller, good to see him back in action after missing a fair bit of the pre-season preparations due to injury. You can hear Thomas Müller is the name being called from. The incredible statistic coming from that game against Bremen, where he did come off the bench. But Thomas Müller has now competed in 16 straight Bundesliga campaigns where he's made at least one appearance or more, which is a new record in club circles here with Bayern. And it is a point I have made on these live streams many a time before. But for me, club legends don't come much better than Thomas Müller. Got to think it may not happen this season, but next season at least, he'll be looking to crack the all-time appearances record with Bayern. Man who has won 12 Bundesliga titles in his time with the German record title holders. I mean, it's an incredibly impressive record for Thomas Müller. And we just want to see him fit and healthy for the rest of the season as he looks to help Bayern. And let's be honest, what is a slightly new role for him, more often coming from the bench. Nevertheless, still such an important player. Serge Gnabry missed out against Werder Bremen, a team he said and credited with the fact that they helped him fall in love with football again. He had a tough time of it when he was on the books with Arsenal and West Bromwich Albion in the Premier League, but Werder Bremen secured his services, and it was in the north of Germany where he did rediscover the passion that has ultimately inspired him to even greater heights in his club career, joining Bayern in the end, and then of course within the international circuit as well, where he is such a key player for Germany, but missed out on the matchday squad against Werder Bremen back in training now, which is good to see, suggesting that he might be available for that first home game of the season against Augsburg, and the Allianz Arena opening its doors for the first time to the Bundesliga. Of course, it has already hosted the Super Cup, and, well, let's be honest, the less said about that game, the better. But Augsburg, it is fair to say, can not be taken for granted. A team that have proven a thorn in Bayern's side at times last season. Of course, it was Augsburg that handed Bayern their first loss of last season. That 1-0 defeat with Megan Berisha scoring the only goal of the game back in September. Bayern did admittedly exact their revenge. They picked up a 5-3 win in the Bundesliga on match day 24 Joao Cancelo, Benjamin Pavard bagging a brace, Leroy Sané, Alphonso Davies on the score sheet for Bayern on that occasion. That was, of course, after their 5-2 win in the DFB Pokal second round last season. So Augsburg beat them 1-0, and then Bayern went and scored 10 goals in 2 games against them in the remaining fixtures of that season. But as a result, that is why Bayern won't be taking their Bavarian counterparts lightly at all. Admittedly, when Augsburg have beaten Bayern, it's normally been in Augsburg at the WWK Arena, not at the Allianz Arena. Nevertheless, Bayern simply well versed in the fact that Augsburg are a side that like to cause them problems. After that, Bayern have an away game against Borussia Mönchengladbach on match day 3. And then back-to-back home games in the Bundesliga against Leverkusen and Bochum. So certainly an opening set of fixtures that really allow Bayern to set their standard for the season. They'll also want to exact revenge on Bayer Leverkusen, of course, a side that defeated them last season. Xabi Alonso getting the better of Julian Nagelsmann in what was his final game with the club before Thomas Tuchel was drafted in to try and steady the Bayern ship. And he's hoping that now, with a full pre-season under his belt and the squad more settled than it was at the start of their preparations, that they really can push on now. He has big aspirations and big expectations, I think it's very fair to say, when it comes to his Bayern side. But on a day like today as well, it has to be said, with temperatures likely to soar well into the 35-degree mark, if not over it here in Munich, every bit of shade is crucial. Of course, for the fans in attendance, it's a chance to top up those tans that they maybe have working on all summer. You can see the cameras are out at all angles, aren't they? Any chance to get a photo of the Bayern players. And that is it. These open training sessions, public training sessions, are a tradition with Bayern. So if you ever are lucky enough to travel to Munich and come visit this wonderful place, then do recommend taking a trip to Sebener. Get on the U-Bahn to Wettersteinplatz. It's a lovely little trip, and it's funny, walking to Sebener, you'd never know Bayern's training ground was just around the corner, and then all of a sudden it pops out of nowhere. But on days like today, it's fair to say, maybe a few families capitalising on the fact that German schools haven't opened just yet. So one last chance before the summer months are over to come and see the Bayern squad in action. Be interesting to see which drills Thomas Tuchel puts his side through today. Talked a lot about wanting the pace of the game to be a little bit faster compared to last season. He lamented the fact that Super Cup defeat for Leipzig felt like a continuation of the previous campaign. But I think it's fair to say he was much happier after the win over Werder Bremen, because he noted the fact that there was a little bit more fluidity in their attacking movements, and that's really what he is calling for from his side. Just wants to see them be a little bit more instinctual, a little bit more natural when building up out on the pitch. But Tuchel, after that win against Werder Bremen, said we played very solid, a very good game from start to finish, no ups and downs. And Bremen did have that strong spell just after half-time where they threatened to try and get back into the game, but ultimately weren't able to reward themselves. Sven Ulreich had a very easy day between the sticks, it has to be said, keeping what is his 30th clean sheet as a Bayern player. And you got to feel for Sven Ulreich a little bit, because so much in the German press And at pre-match press conferences and post-match press conferences is being made about the current goalkeeping situation. And he had to really drown out a lot of noise, I think, over the summer, Sven Ulreich, because he was still technically at the start of the summer competing with Jan Sommer and Alexander Nubel. Nubel now on loan with Stuttgart in the Bundesliga. Jan Sommer has left to join Inter Milan in the Serie A. And when it came to Manuel Neuer's recovery, initially there were mixed reports about whether he may even be out for longer than anticipated. However, there have been a lot of positive sounds coming out of the Bayern camp recently. There have even been social media clips floating around online of him doing some goalkeeping specific training drills and looking good doing them as well. So I think it's very clear that Bayern are not going to rush Sven Ulreich back into action, or excuse me, Manuel Neuer back into action when they have Sven Ulreich, who has proven such a loyal and able deputy. And as I said, he drowned out a lot of noise to now ultimately be getting a few starts under his belt at the start of the season, giving Manuel Neuer the time to focus on his recovery and not feel like he has to rush back. But let's be honest, Manuel Neuer, also the type of goalkeeper, the type of player that just wants to be out on the pitch at all times. There's absolutely no doubt about that. This is ultimately the relaxing part of the training session for the players as well, just doing the warm-up stretches. Meanwhile, it's fair to say, I think some of the fans warming up themselves on the sidelines in the baking heat. But the chance to get a photo, to get a signature, cannot be passed up. And especially given the fact that the majority of the first-team regulars are all fit and healthy. Really is a chance for some of these fans. And you just never know, right? Some of these fans might turn up on a regular basis, but this might be their only chance to come to an open training session like this all season. And so the players, once the warm-ups, once the training session is done, they will spend some time signing autographs, taking some photos, and spending time with the fans that have taken the time to come out today. And as I say, there really was, I'd estimate 3,000 quite comfortably. Whether all of them were allowed in, I don't know what the allowance is, or the attendance allowance is here at Zeebrugge Straße. But the queue really was round the block, as they say. So not easy to get a front row seat here. Bernie, as you can see there on the right of your screen, you got high fives from all the players as they came out from the changing rooms. But he too will spend some time with the fans, making sure that he gets a few autographs signed as well. Takes a few photos. Getting a close look here at Matthijs de Ligt. Wasn't in the starting lineup against Werder Bremen. Did come off the bench to replace Min Jae Kim, the South Korean signed from Napoli in the summer. Matthijs de Ligt, winner of Bayern's Goal of the Season award last season for that stunning effort he scored against Freiburg in a 1-0 win. 1-0 win that, let's be honest, proved crucial to Bayern retaining their title for an 11th straight season in the Bundesliga. And so it raised a few eyebrows when he wasn't in the starting lineup, but all suggestions are that he's recovered from the knock that kept him out of the first 11 and might well slot straight back into the starting lineup for the matchday 2 encounter against Augsburg. And there he is, the mascot Bernie. Unfortunately, those with the Kane shirt are going to be a little disappointed today. Won't be getting the signature of the England captain. So a reminder in case you are just joining us and maybe wondering where Harry Kane is. Not to fear. there is a reason that he is not attending today's open training session, and that is because he became a father for the 4th time on Sunday. And he will return to Zebenstrasse tomorrow, but our congratulations go out to him and wife Kate for the birth of their 4th child. But as a result, he will not be in attendance today. Thomas Tuchel, full of praise for Harry Kane's impact. And he was admitting last season when Bayern was struggling without an out-and-out number 9 that if you look at the Champions League's most dominant teams, that they ultimately have a reliable striker to call upon who plays at a world-class level. And of course, it really was the hot topic on the summer transfer market. Every big club seemed to be looking for an out-and-out striker that they could count upon. And Bayern now have one in the form of Harry Kane. And I think already we could just see the impact he made, and it really wasn't even in a goal-scoring sense necessarily, but it really was all over the pitch. It was incredibly impressive to see. There were some key defensive headers, one at the back to chip in with the defensive duties as well. There were some wonderful passing plays that came out of the England captain in midfield when he dropped deep, or even when Bayern were on the counter-attack. There was one in particular, wonderful pass, reminiscent of a quarterback in the NFL, just pinged it down the left wing. I want to say for the run of Leroy Sané, but don't quote me on who the recipient of the pass was. Of course, he did have a hand in Leroy Sané's first goal. Little 1-2 between Sané and Kane. And Sané put the finishing touches on it to give Bayern an early lead. And everyone thought that Bayern might kick on from there, as we've seen them do in seasons past, but they had to be patient in breaking Werder Bremen down. And Thomas Tuchel, I think, enjoyed what he saw from his side, because he saw them try ultimately several different ways to break down that Werder side. And Harry Kane was drifting left, right to get involved. He had his back to goal. He was calling for the ball to feet, and all of those were big ticks in the boxes of Thomas Tuchel. Of course, one result over the course of a whole season can give very little indication. But the signs for Bayern, very promising, it has to be said. Of course, a reminder that FC Bayern TV Plus subscribers can now watch the documentary A Glimpse of Hope, about that thrilling end to last season when Jamal Musiala, and I mean, not to spoil it for you, ladies and gentlemen, but if I'm spoiling it for you now, it's a little late to the party, but when Jamal Musiala scored ultimately what was a clutch late winner, Bayern went into the final match day without fate in their own hands, but they left with the title in it. But wherever you are in the world, and wherever you're tuning in from, we're delighted to have you along for this live and open training session at Zebenstrasse. As you can see, the sun is shining. Glorious conditions. Here in one of the suburbs just south of the city centre. But a chance for Bayern just to stretch their legs a little bit after their exertions over the weekend. Of course, at some point soon, the games are going to start coming thick and fast. Of course, Bayern also have that DFB Pokal first round tie still to play on account of the Super Cup postponing their game against Preußen Münster until the 26th of September. We're not too far away from the Champions League group stage draw taking place as well. That's on August 31st, where Bayern will, of course, as per usual, be in pot 1. Last season, they went through the group stages with that incredibly unblemished record, setting Champions League best marks tumbling as well, on account of their, I believe, is it 13-game unbeaten streak in the group stages? I'd have to go back and have a look at that, actually. But ultimately, their record in the group stages will be a source of pride, but little else for Bayern, because their aim at the start of every season is ultimately to get their hands on that Champions League title. And unfortunately, in recent seasons, their story has often been cut short in that competition. And last season, they lost to eventual winners Manchester City. Season before that, it was Villarreal, Paris Saint-Germain in the 2021 campaign. So for 3 straight seasons, they've been knocked out in the quarterfinals, and they have the aspirations of certainly bettering that record this season. Thomas Tuchel, of course, a man who has previously won the Champions League as well with Chelsea. Beating Manchester City back in 2021 to, on that occasion, deny Pep Guardiola what would have been his first Champions League title with Manchester City. They did finally get their hands on it last season as part of their treble win. Well, as long as all the players got all those instructions, and this drill should be relatively straightforward, but admittedly it's one of the more complex drills, although I'm starting to get the idea of it. Ultimately, it's about playing under pressure and a first touch as well. Nothing too strenuous, though, and I think that really is the key on a day like today. Keeping everyone limber, keeping everyone sharp, but not overexerting themselves in these conditions, because temperatures are absolutely soaring right now in Bavaria. Have been for the last couple of days. Hopefully the weather stays good as well for the first home game of the season on the weekend. Thumbs up from Thomas Müller to those in attendance. A fan favourite, without question, Mr. Thomas Müller. Always has been, always will be. And sometime in the not-so-distant future, unfortunately, his career, his wonderful, illustrious career, is going to have to come to an end. And I, for one, am very intrigued to see what he does next. He has talked previously about mooting the idea of going into coaching. At the other end of the age spectrum, Franz Kretzig there. Man, well, the player who really burst onto the scene during pre-season with that stunning goal against Liverpool, the winner in their meeting in Singapore. Right now in competition with Alphonso Davies for that left-back role, but seen as certainly a bright prospect for the future. The young 21-year-old Kretzig. So I always like to do this. I do have an eye on the Facebook chat running alongside this live stream, so I always throw out the invitation to anyone tuning in. Feel free to get in touch if you've got any questions or opinions that you'd like to share or discuss. I'm open to any and all suggestions for the most part, let's be honest. There are lines, people, that we can't cross. But if you've got a question about Bayern, about one of the players, I'm all ears. Let me know where in the world you're tuning in from. It's always fascinating to see Bayern's global fan base turn up to live training sessions like this online. Got people tuning in from South Africa. We've got hello from the UAE. Watching live from Zambia, from Ghana. I'm getting love as well. Hello from Thailand. This is exactly what I'm talking about. It really is a global fan base that Bayern have here, and they've built up over the years, and rightly so, with their incredible stature and star-studded squads that they've treated football fans to down the years. Question from Alicia asking, is Harry Kane fitting in? Well, I haven't had the chance to speak to him personally yet, Alicia. But what I can tell you, in case anyone is wondering, in case anyone's just joined the live stream, but Harry Kane not taking part today, but that is due to the fact that he welcomed his son into the world on Sunday, becoming a father for the 4th time. He will return to Zebenstrasse tomorrow, but unfortunately what that means is that he today misses out on what would have been his first ever live training session since joining from Tottenham in the Premier League. Everyone wondering whether he could be the missing piece for Bayern after last season, when they really had aspirations of going a little further in the DFB Pokal and the Champions League as well. Or you've even got people from Cambodia and New Zealand getting in touch. Goodness me, what time must it be there in the world? But nice to also see well wishes for Harry Kane, and congratulations on the fact that he has become a father for the 4th time. Main thing in those situations is everyone's happy and healthy. Someone's asking, who's the tall guy? Connor, I see you. That, my friend, would be the goalkeeper, the backup goalkeeper, Tom Ritzy Hulsmann. He's a whopping 2 meters tall, and right now is playing second fiddle to Sven Ulreich, given the fact that Manuel Neuer is still out injured, but still yet to make his Bayern debut, but has been a key player for the youth sides over the last couple of years. So I hope that answers your question, Connor. Because yes, he's a whopping 2 meters tall. Very easy to pick out at times. But maybe let me throw out, seeing as I'm looking at the live chat on Facebook, maybe let me throw out a question. I've asked you where in the world you're tuning in from, but maybe let me ask you another question. How many goals do you think Harry Kane is going to score this season? And we'll make it all competitions. We won't just make it the Bundesliga. We'll say all competitions. How many goals do you think Harry Kane will score, or what do you think would be a number he needs to hit for it to be considered a successful season for Harry Kane? I'd love to hear some answers on that question, so feel free to drop them in the live chat and let me know. We'll start the discussion point soon as we see this training session still going on. And it is interesting that Ritzy Hulsmann, the goalkeeper, is still taking part in these outfield drills. The goalkeepers haven't been separated, but I'm assuming, Connor, that that's the big lad that you're talking about on the left of your screen. He's just gone out of shot, but there he comes back into again. So he's not an outfielder that you haven't spotted or haven't heard about yet. He is the backup goalkeeper right now for Bayern. Sven Ulreich keeping a clean sheet on the opening day of the season in that 4-0 win against Werder Bremen. He'll be happy with that. He just needs to hold down the fort until Manuel Neuer is back to full fitness. Here we go. We've got lots of questions coming in, or sorry, lots of answers coming into my question about the Harry Kane goals. Love to see it. So thank you, everyone, for getting in touch. Alicia says easy 30 goals. Grant says Kane will score at least 40 for the season. Zachele, I hope I'm saying that name right, 30 goals as well. Niklaus says 35. Raymond says 35. Fixie says 25 to 30. Crispy goes with the 50 goal mark. Well, there's the first person to pull that one out. Good on you, Crispy, for having the confidence. John's even gone for 60. Goodness me. That, I mean, would maybe be expecting a little too much, in my opinion. I think Harry Kane is an incredible goal scorer. But I'm not even sure Robert Lewandowski scored 60 goals in a single season for Bayern. And I'm just thinking back to the record-breaking one where he had 41 in the Bundesliga. But there's no way he had another 20 in the DFB Pokal and the Champions League combined. So I like the answers that are around about the 30, 35 goal mark, because I think that is a very realistic target. You got to think, you know, he'll probably be looking to score more than a goal every other game in the Bundesliga. So you may be thinking about 20 minimum in the Bundesliga. You chip in with a couple more in the DFB Pokal and the Champions League, and you're pushing 30. And I genuinely think that would certainly be a successful season, because as much as Harry Kane has been brought here to score goals, I think we saw something so important about his impact on the game for Bayern in that first match against Werder Bremen, and it was the setup for the first goal for Leroy Sané, the fact that he dropped deep, the fact that he was willing to play that 1-2 and let Leroy Sané use his pace by bursting beyond Harry Kane. And that's going to be something that backlines that come up against Bayern this season are going to have to cope with. It's the fact that Harry Kane can drop deep and their centre-back cannot afford to get sucked in too much, because Kingsley Coman, Serge Gnabry, Leroy Sané, Jamal Musiala, all of those players, if not more, are ready to make that run beyond Harry Kane to try and get on the score sheet. And I just think that while Harry Kane, he will score the goals, I think his impact is going to go so far beyond just him hitting the back of the net. But I like the confidence that we're seeing from the chat here. Vangelis even says, he'll score around 40 to 45. There you go. Grant has done my hard work for me. Thank you very much, Grant. I was just trying to look it up myself while I was chatting away. But Grant has done the hard work for me, and he scored 55 goals for that record-breaking season in 2021-22. And that was in all competitions. So I very, very much appreciate you doing the legwork for me behind the scenes there, Grant. And I think, for a first season with Harry Kane, I think, let's be honest, Harry Kane is a striker, and Bayern a squad more than capable of creating 55 goal-scoring opportunities for Harry Kane quite comfortably. And he's quite capable of scoring 55 goals in a single season in all competitions. But I think expecting that in this first season would maybe be setting the bar a little too high, because really it's about the positive impact he's going to make on the likes of Jamal Musiala and Serge Gnabry as well. Release them, because Jamal Musiala last season at times was carrying the responsibility of scoring the goals. Then Eric Maxim Choupo-Moting kind of took over that burden. But Harry Kane loves scoring goals, loves playing as the lone striker, and will happily accept that responsibility. And his main aim, if you listen to some of the interviews he's given since joining the club, one of his main aims is to make the teammates around him better as well. It's a very humble and admirable and noble way of going about things. But if you look at his time with Tottenham, Harry Kane was a superstar player, but also put a lot of focus on helping improve those around him. And it wasn't this out-and-out selfish striker. And I just think that's why Thomas Tuchel, that's why Bayern really went above and beyond to try and sign Harry Kane, because they felt he could be the missing piece that could maybe take them back to winning 2, perhaps even 3 titles again in a single campaign. Harry Kane himself admitted it. He said Thomas Tuchel played a major role, but when you come to a club like Bayern, you have to win. That's the expectation. Paul is asking where Harry Kane is now. I have admittedly just been waxing lyrical about him. So I'll remind you again, as I'll do throughout this live stream, Harry Kane not in attendance today on account that he became a father for the 4th time on Sunday. And as a result, he won't return to Sebener until tomorrow. But there is good reason for him not being in attendance today. Although it is a shame. It would have been lovely to see Harry Kane in what would have been his first live training session on the Bayern channels today. But there will be plenty of opportunities, I have no doubt. And the fact is, his goal against Werder Bremen, simply the start of things to come. I don't think there's any doubt about that either. The first of many goals that he's going to score in a Bayern shirt. Joshua Kimmich also pleased with the response that Bayern showed in that defeat. To that defeat against Leipzig. And ultimately, a player that always strives for perfection at the highest level. Has a lot of demands for himself. Nevertheless, there's still a debate going on about whether his desire to affect so much of the play prevents him from being the out-and-out number 6 that maybe Bayern need and that Thomas Tuchel has asked for. The fact is, if they don't sign any other midfielders, I don't think they'll have a problem on account of the fact that they've got such a plethora of options in midfield. Joshua Kimmich, Leon Goretzka, Konrad Laimer, Ryan Gravenberch. These are top quality individuals, top quality midfielders. Yeah, Alexander asking what Bayern's next fixture is. I can tell you it's a home game against Augsburg on Sunday, the first time the Allianz Arena will open its doors for a Bundesliga fixture this season. As, of course, played host to the Super Cup, the 3-0 defeat to Leipzig, where Dani Olmo became the first non-Bayern player to score a hat-trick at the Allianz Arena since Robert Glatzel did it in 2019. Back then, that was a DFB Pokal second-round tie against Heidenheim, who are now in the Bundesliga, became the 57th team to compete in Germany's top flight, making their debut on the weekend against Wolfsburg. It did end in defeat, but nice to have a bit of a romantic story with Heidenheim in Germany's top flight this season. Nevertheless, they won't have fond memories of facing Bayern after that cup defeat, but Robert Glatzel no longer on their books. It was an incredible match, I remember. Bayern winning the high-scoring affair in the end, but Heidenheim gave such a good account of themselves. With the sun beating down here at Sebener, very important to keep everything hydrated. That's not just the players. Niklaus saying Harry Kane isn't just a goal scorer on the pitch. Oh, I shouldn't read that out loud. You had me thinking it was an innocent comment there, Niklaus, but bit of a tongue-in-cheek one there that I'll refrain from refrain from reading out, but you almost got me in trouble. Almost got me in trouble. Crispy Pockets, he says, today is my birthday. My name is Dennis. So Dennis, happy birthday. Don't mind giving out a birthday shout. Shout out on the feed as well. Thanks for tuning in. Always a pleasure. Personally, I just love hearing from as many Bayern fans as possible during these things. I think there's some great discussions that we've had in the past. Connor's loving what he's seeing from Ritzy Hulsmann as well. Connor also asking the question of whether Bayern will win the Champions League this season. I think confidence levels are always high when it comes to a competition that Bayern have thrived in the past. Yes, recent seasons haven't been as kind to them as they would have liked, being knocked out in the quarterfinals in 3 straight campaigns. For some clubs, that would be a really good record. For a club like Bayern, their aspirations are a lot higher. Now, personally, I would back them to get beyond the quarterfinals this season. I think Harry Kane is that X factor that can make a difference. But let's be honest, I mean, the competition for that Champions League title is incredibly fierce this season. I do believe that Bayern are capable of it. I do believe that Thomas Tuchel knows what it takes to win that title. I think he knows what he needs to do to get the best out of this team to win that title. But when you're coming up against, these behemoth sides that have spent huge fees on not maybe just one player, but multiple players this summer, and I'm talking about the Manchester Cities, I'm talking about the Real Madrids of this world, it's certainly not a foregone conclusion ever in the Champions League, that's for certain. But Bayern, with Harry Kane on board, I do believe are more than capable of winning that Champions League title again. No doubt. Got people tuning in from Sweden, from Malta. Paul asking why Gnabry didn't play against Werder Bremen. He was carrying a knock, Paul. That's why he wasn't in the matchday squad. He is in training, though, today, which suggests that he'll be back for that game against Augsburg on Sunday. Alexander saying Thomas Tuchel really got us scared on the first match against Leipzig. We almost felt he wasn't good anymore. Well, that is the fickle nature of the world of football, but I always err on the side of caution when it comes to things like that. Don't jump to conclusions too quickly. Thomas Tuchel is an incredibly talented head coach, and he has an incredibly talented squad at his disposal now. And the key difference this season for Thomas Tuchel, Alexander, is that he has had a full pre-season to work with his side and really get his ideas across, instead of taking over at the back end during the business end of the season when life is so tough for teams, especially one like Bayern who are chasing so many titles. They have to be near perfect at all times, and he didn't want to come in and make too many big waves. Now that he's had time to work with this squad during this summer, something tells me bigger and better things are set to come from this Bayern side. Mohammed, you're asking who my favourite player in the squad is. Oh, that's a great question. I'll be honest, I've got a couple. I'm a huge fan of Jamal Musiala because I just think he's an incredible talent. I mean, wonderful player, isn't he? I mean, the minute he gets the ball at his feet, you just feel, you have that sense that something's going to happen. And while teams are definitely playing a closer eye to him now in terms of making sure they don't give him as much time and space to operate in, I think his talents are just the type of talents that are going to continue to grow and grow and grow. And I think he's got a huge, huge future ahead. And I think, he could be up there if he decides to stay with Bayern his whole career and follow in the footsteps of someone like Thomas Müller, the man on your screen there, cooling himself off. Then Jamal Musiala is the type of player that has started at the type of age that he could break all of Müller's records, if we're looking at it that way, if Bayern remain as dominant. But I'm a big fan of Thomas Müller as well. I think he's a breath of fresh air in the world of professional football, where he is a little raw, honest and open, and is willing to have a laugh with the media at times. I think that's nice. He's also very willing to not mince his words either, and really make it clear how he feels. I think Alphonso Davies is an incredible player, and his dynamism down the left is always a joy to behold. But I've got to say, I said this on the live stream for the web radio coverage we did of that Bremen game on the weekend, but I'll say it again here. I'm an Englishman, right? I grew up in Germany. I moved here at an early age, and Germany has become my second home. But if you had told me as a 9-year-old that the England captain would join Bayern München, I would never have believed it. And it would have been this out-of-the-world idea that I would have never been able to grasp my head around. And so it's a weird thing. I feel an immense sense of pride that Harry Kane has come and joined this club. And I think it's such a cool thing that the England captain has left England to play his football elsewhere and go and take in a new culture. So I've given you 3 players that I really like, and of course Harry Kane as well has to go down. I hope that answers your question. Mohammed. I mean, let me know who your favourite players are, guys, because that's another great question to ask. We had a wonderful question asking how many goals Harry Kane would score earlier this season. I thank you for all your responses. We had plenty of them, ranging from 25 all the way up to, I think we had 60 plus at one point as well. But let me know who your favourite players are, because there are so many to choose from and so many to like. Some of the performances for Matthijs de Ligt last season made me fall in love with him a little bit because of his defensive work. Alicia asking, are the trainings like this always open to the public to watch the players train, or is today a special training for the fans? Bayern, this is a tradition. They don't have a fixed schedule per se. They do try and every couple of weeks open the doors to a public training session like this. They don't do it every week. Some weeks it's not possible with Champions League or DFB Pokal duties as well. But they do try and open their doors as often as they can to the public. It's something they feel is really important to stay connected with the fans. It's something they lost during the COVID period as well, and they really missed, actually. You talk to some of the players, and they really enjoy interacting with the fans, you know, spending time with them, signing some kits or pictures and taking some photos as well. And, you know, a club like Bayern, with the amount of money that goes splashing around and stuff like that, it would be easy for them to forget about the fans. It's what has happened to a lot of clubs in modern football. It's been such a shame to see in other countries, but Bayern have never lost that. They've always retained that connection with their fans, that Mia San Mia philosophy that is so far-reaching throughout the entire city of Munich, not least amongst the fans. So I hope that answers your question, Alicia, that these do happen more often. And I do, as I said, I encourage people earlier, if you're ever in Munich, if you ever have the fortune to come and visit this lovely part of the world, which I would highly recommend, of course, because I live here, but come to Säbener Straße, come and see if there's an open training session, and if you get lucky, come and see these players in action. Connor, you're getting your wish. Seeing some fancy footwork there from Ritzy Hulsmann, the 2-metre tall goalkeeper. Gotta love moments like that. Alexander asking, do I think Bayern need another signing to complete the squad? No, I'll be honest. I think this squad is capable of winning titles the way it is. Do I think that they could sign another player that would maybe improve them in a position? Potentially. But we prefer not to speculate too much, and especially we don't talk about players that are on the books at other clubs. So I'll refrain from speculating at all. But I think if you look at this Bayern squad, you have to say that it's got to be complete. You know, the star-studded nature of it, the amount of world-class talent they have, the fact they have strengthened in key positions during the summer. Konrad Laimer coming in from Leipzig, Min-Jae Kim replacing Luka Hernandez, who left to join Paris Saint-Germain. Rafael Guerreiro addressing the lack of depth at that left-back position. Maybe one surprising bit of news, actually, is that Josip Stanisic has joined Bayer Leverkusen on loan. That's a great move for Stanisic, I'll be honest, but I just wonder whether it might leave Bayern a little short at right-back at times this season, because I think Stanisic was a valuable player for them at times. Matthias is asking about Neuer. Neuer not in team training, but he is working individually on his recovery and his return. And after we got some mixed reports a few weeks ago, it was good to see that there were some very positive signs coming out of the Bayern camp about the fact that he might be able to return to team training in a couple of weeks' time, and his return to competitive action wouldn't be too far behind, you don't think, Manuel Neuer, but they are going to take every precautionary measure they can with him, because it's a big injury for a goalkeeper to suffer. Ryan, that's a great question. There's a great question. I'll read this one out loud. Ryan on Facebook asking, what did I think of the change in momentum against Bremen when they brought on Müller, Tell and Choupo? It was very noticeable. It was very impressive. And I do think, that's Matthijs Tell really wanting to make something happen. I think Eric Maxim Choupo-Moting now in a bit of a different role. The motivation levels for those two will be really high with Harry Kane on the books and the level of competition just rising. But Thomas Müller is Thomas Müller, and I think it really was the case of, at that point, they were 2-0 up. And the shackles, I think, and that the weight of responsibility had fallen off their shoulders a little bit, because I think there was pressure on Bayern coming into that game, pressure on them to show that response to the defeat to Leipzig. And at 1-0 early doors, everything was looking good. They were dominating possession. Bremen were barely getting a sniff at goal. And Bremen had that positive spell after half-time, which maybe a little fear might have crept in for a few Bayern fans. They might have been having flashbacks to last season going, oh no, is this going to be another game where we should have killed the game off in the first half? We didn't kill the game off in the first half, and then Bremen are going to get lucky with, one of their few chances. I mean, how many times last season did teams take points off Bayern with just one shot on target? I remember Köln did it. I remember Frankfurt did it. And I think there might have even been another team that did it as well, actually. But off the top of my head, that third team is evading my memory. But the fact is that change in momentum really saw Bayern kick on. It was a case of, right, Bayern need to be a little bit more ruthless this season in killing games off. And it would have been nice to see the first team do it, the starting lineup do it. But those three players that he brought on certainly helped change the momentum and certainly helped them kill off that game. And that's also a key facet of this Bayern side, given the bench that they have, given the depth that they have in so many positions. You look at the players they have that don't make the starting lineup. They have to have the ambition of coming on and killing off games as well. When Bayern and the starting lineup at that point have really worked Bremen down and worn them down as well to make them tired, that injection of pace late on can be so key for a side like the German record title holders. Lissi also asking how Min Jae Kim is settling in. I think it's fair to say quite nicely, though admittedly was brought off early against Werder Bremen to be replaced by Matthijs de Ligt. I think it's fair to say he's still getting used to Bayern's build-up play, the South Korean, but you can see the makings of a very good defender there. Clearly reads the game really well, and I think doesn't seem to have had any problems settling in a new environment, new culture, new club. It's not a foregone conclusion, but then given the fact that he's been in Italy for the last couple of years, he's used to living abroad, and then his command of the English language seems to be quite proficient as well, which is always a useful thing. Ali asking, when will Manuel Neuer come back to team training? I don't know, Ali, is the answer to that, and I don't think anyone on the Bayern books necessarily knows right now. They might have a plan, and I think the plan is in a couple of weeks' time. But as you can see, that's very loose phrasing when it comes to Manuel Neuer. And I think just going to have to be patient when it comes to his return. Plenty of nice comments coming in. May not be able to read them all. There you go. Niklaus, I can actually read this question and comment from me without getting in trouble. But asking, who do I think will grab the golden boot this season? Harry Kane. Chupo, he says Jerome or Serge. Well, I think it's got to be Harry Kane. He's got to be the favourite. Unless something really unfortunate happens where he picks up a nasty injury or something like that. But he's a player that throughout his career has rarely suffered long-term injuries, which is always a good sign. And I'm sure something that Bayern will have liked to read in their scouting report as well. But I reckon he's going to be comfortably Bayern's top scorer this season. Got to say, shout out to Grant, because he's doing a lot of answering of questions in the chat as well, which is sometimes great because I can't necessarily get to all of them. So I do thank you, Grant, for your wonderful work behind the scenes on the Facebook live chat for this open training session. I'll answer your question because he says, do you think Stanisic will play rotation as a centre-back or right-back for Bayer Leverkusen? I think he really has been brought in to play part of that three-man back line. There was talk about whether Xabi Alonso might switch to a four-man back line, and I think maybe Stanisic will facilitate the option there, because what Leverkusen don't want to do is drop Jeremy Frimpong back to right back, because he's such a dynamic player going forward. It would take away from his game a little bit. However, if you bring in Stanisic, it does allow you to maybe play with a four-man back line, play Frimpong as a right winger, play Stanisic as the right back. But I don't think that will be what happens the majority of the time. I think the majority of the time, Stanisic will likely be playing as a centre-back. And I think that's not necessarily a bad thing for him, because it'll be a centre-back, not quite of the four-man back-line variation, but he'll be having to learn how to shift position as part of a three-man back-line, which, let's be honest, if he plays at right-back for Bayern, when Davies bombs up the left, that's what he needs to do. He needs to settle in as that right-sided third centre-back alongside Upamecano and De Ligt or Kim or whoever it is. And I think that might be a good way for him actually to hone his craft a little bit with Leverkusen. He should, I would imagine, get more game time there, though I do think he would have got good enough game time with Bayern that he still could have continued his development. But to go to Leverkusen, a club that really are looking very good for this season, I'm very excited about their prospects under Xabi Alonso in the current campaign. And their 3-2 win against Leipzig on matchday 1, not a bad result either, you have to say. So I'm excited to see what they can do, and I think Stanisic might actually play quite a pivotal role in their success this season, which would be nice. Paul with a bold prediction for the opening Bundesliga home game of the season against Augsburg, saying Bayern will beat Augsburg 5-3. There's a go. We'll throw that question out there. What's your prediction for the game against Augsburg? What will the scoreline be? Put your answers in the chat. We've got so many comments coming in. One from Chike saying Kimmich is at best a box-to-box and gets carried away with orchestrating play. We need someone who can sit to protect the back four. A lot of times last season the centre-backs were exposed in 2-against-2 contests. You are welcome to your opinion there, Chike, and I'm not disagreeing with it. I just think Bayern don't need to solve the problem that you're talking about with a signature of a new player. I think that's a good way to formulate it, because yes, they could go into the transfer market. They could try and sign an out-and-out number 6. You know, you look at Liverpool, who signed Wataru Endo from Stuttgart for that reason, and Bayern could have maybe made that signature, but why? Why disrupt the squad even more? Because what are you doing then? What are you going to do then? Let's just pretend Bayern sign a new number 6. Who are you dropping out of that squad? You're dropping Goretzka and playing Kimmich, and then you're going to have Goretzka, Gravenberch, and Konrad Laimer sitting on the bench unhappy. And for me, the danger of bringing in a new number 6 and making those 3 players unhappy is more dangerous to Bayern than the prospect of them not having their back four protected at all times. Right? I don't think that's an unfair way to formulate that statement here. And so that's what in some ways I do agree. Yes, Kimmich, for me, sometimes needs to focus more on the defensive side of it than the attacking side of it. And he does love to be the quarterback, but he does such a wonderful job at it. He's one of the best in the world when it comes to that. I mean, you think about best passers in the world from open play, Toni Kroos is clearly up there, but you're also a Kimmich. Some of the little dink passes over the top that are so pinpoint, they're a joy to behold. Daniel saying, I don't think we need a number 6. We have good depth at his position. See, Daniel agrees with me. And that's it. Don't get me wrong. There isn't a specialist number 6, right? There isn't that midfield enforcer. Your Casemiros, your Wataru Endos, your Sergio Busquets back in the day, right? There's not that player. But are you telling me that you don't think that Konrad Laimer, Leon Goretzka and Kimmich are talented enough to protect a backline? I think they are. I think they just need to tweak their roles a little bit. And I'm hoping that Thomas Tuchel has worked on that during the summer, especially, the test of that is ultimately going to be when they come up against big teams. It won't be against Werder Bremen or Augsburg necessarily. Leverkusen might give them a big test on match day 4, but it'll be in the big games in the Champions League that ultimately we'll see whether that stands the test of time. And I just think, one of the key things when you're a Bayern head coach, when you're someone like Thomas Tuchel, is making sure that the mood in camp is a good one. It's a competitive one, but no one's disgruntled, no one's unhappy, no one's really, maybe souring the mood. And right now there's a tricky balancing act going on with Ryan Gravenberch and maybe the role he's going to play this season, because I think it's clear that he wanted more game time last season, didn't get it in his debut campaign. But Thomas Tuchel has talked glowingly of Ryan Gravenberch. There's been a lot of praise for the Dutch midfielder. All eyes on Joshua Kimmich. I've got to say, liking the look of this drill. playing in a hexagon carved out. The pink team are trying to press. Kimmich's clearly one of the link-up players in the middle, but the idea really for either team to control possession. Oh, just as we're enjoying that, they take us away from it. But sometimes that's what happens on live coverage like this. Quite all right. We should not forget that the goalkeepers are also in action. But as we have pointed out many a time, Manuel Neuer still working in individual training on the road to recovery. A reminder for anyone that has been asking, there have been a couple of people, that Harry Kane is not in training today on account of the fact that he became a father for the 4th time on Sunday. You can go to social media to see his posts about it, but congratulations to him and wife Kate. But as a result, he will return to Sebenstrasse tomorrow and misses out on today's live training session. But he'll be back in action soon enough, I have no doubt. And raring to go as well. Alifando asking about Bayern's best formation. And that was interesting because Thomas Tuchel was actually asked about the idea of a 3-man back line. And he said, I think, Bayern, his side are capable of it. But I think it's very clear that his preference is this stability afforded by this 4-2-3-1 system. And let's be honest, it's a system that's ingrained in this Bayern side. It has been for over a decade now, since Jupp Heynckes really made it such a popular formation with that incredible run. To the Champions League title in his famous stint in charge. Daniel chipping in on the midfielder debate when it was talked about the fact that Kimmich is at his best when he's playing box to box, and Daniel rightly pointing out that that's the Goretzka role really, or the Konrad Laimer one. I think it was maybe a surprise to people that Konrad Laimer, having started every game in pre-season, didn't start the matchday 1 fixture against Werder Bremen. But Tuchel clearly had an idea of the fact that he felt that game was going to be more physical, and therefore the stature, the physical prowess of Leon Goretzka was going to be a little more useful in midfield than Konrad Laimer. So it'll be interesting to see what he does against Augsburg, who, let's be honest, they're a combative side as well. Grant saying that I think we need a Javi Martinez-esque defensive holding midfielder that will fight hard. Kimmich is great box-to-box, but I'm not sure he quite enjoys the defensive work. I agree with you. I see that in his game as well, and I'm not disputing that point at all, because when Bayern are on the ball, Kimmich wants to be involved. He's not going to be the man that just sits back and keeps the overview and makes sure he knows where all the threats are coming from. He wants to be what he's being in this training drill, the pivot person that links the play from defence to attack, and wants to play that quarterback role of looking for the incisive passes, whether those be through the air, along the ground, out wide, whichever way you want to look at it. And so I agree. He's not Matthijs de Ligt. Matthijs de Ligt loves defending, right? Like, you listen to the way he talks about defending, and it's like listening to a striker talk about scoring goals. Matthijs de Ligt loves defending. Kimmich, I think, is happy to defend, but he doesn't love it. And so I agree with you there. But this is the point I made as well in the earlier part. Javi Martinez was a special player because he was happy being a role player and fulfilling the role. Bayern would have to be careful in buying a player right now in the summer that would maybe come in with too many expectations. But then if you're going to buy this defensive specialist that everyone thinks that Bayern needs, surely the idea is to sign that player and then he comes straight into the starting lineup. And I again point out that the risk of upsetting not just Leon Goretzka, not just Konrad Laimer, but Ryan Gravenberch as well. I mean, that's 3 players that will just potentially be a bit of a cloud that could hang over the club. And that's what I'm sure the Bayern decision makers are weighing up right now in terms of whether they do dip into the transfer market at all anymore. But yeah. Trying to look at a few more of the comments that have come in recently. And again, I point out, anyone tuning in, We've got, according to the Facebook Live numbers, just over 1,500 of you. So really, I mean, incredible turnout today. So thank you so much for tuning in wherever you are in the world. And we have been enjoying the worldwide fan base that Bayern have. But if you've got any questions or opinions that you want to discuss, feel free to put them in the chat. And Ali's got one here. Now, this is interesting. We're going to have to try and interpret this question, Ali, so hopefully I interpret it correctly. But he's asking, is your opinion that the dualism of De Ligt and Kim is the best for Bayern? So I think what you're asking there is whether I think the partnership of De Ligt and Kim might be the best one for Bayern this season. Now, that's a hard question to answer, actually, right now, because I like the look of what we've seen from Kim. But as I said earlier, there have been times where he's clearly not as comfortable in the build-up play for Bayern. So maybe, for now, I would perhaps say that the Upamecano-De Ligt partnership that had a lot of time to build last season, where they maybe have a better understanding because they've worked together a lot more often, I think that one might be the best one going forward for now. I do think Min-Jae Kim, long-term, is more than capable of winning a starting berth at centre-back on a regular basis, without question. I think we saw his quality with Napoli as they had that historic Serie A win for the first time in 33 years. And he played in 35 of their 38 league games last season. So I'd say, Ali, the jury is still out. The fact is, though, if you're choosing between three centre-backs and your choices are De Ligt, Min-Jae Kim and Dayot Upamecano, I tell you what a luxury. Oh, I don't know what Thomas Muller's doing in the background, but he's doing something to make a few people chuckle in the crowd. Understandable that the players are enjoying themselves. On a day like today, as I say, the conditions just absolutely glorious. Couldn't ask for more. Maybe the temperature could drop just a few degrees because it is absolutely scorching out there. And now you can hear some of the younger fans in attendance calling out to their favourite players. German schools, I think, if I'm not mistaken, go back next week. So this is the last chance before their summer holidays end to come out and see their favourite players in action. And the Bayern players still being put through their paces here. Grant, thanks for your opinion here. I love the interaction, Grant, as well. Always appreciate people getting in touch in the chat, but he's chimed in on the centre-back debate as well, saying as long as De Ligt is starting, it really doesn't matter who else is on the back line because everyone we have is solid. And that's exactly it. I couldn't agree more. And De Ligt is really the leader that I think Bayern have been missing at the back in recent seasons. Yes, I mean, you had the likes of Mats Hummels, Jerome Boateng in seasons past, but De Ligt has given them a bit of a different dynamic in that back line. Not a bad threat to have in the opponent's box either, it has to be said, the Dutchman, because he's attacks every header like his life depends on it. And he scored a couple of goals last season, but something tells me there might be a few more in his locker in the current campaign. Husseini also getting in touch, saying, I think Kim and De Ligt is more fit than Upamecano. Reckons that Thomas Muller should always start ahead of Musiala. Ooh, that's a big call. That's a big call, Husseini. Okay, but he says, here's the rationale, ladies and gentlemen. So we open up this can of worms now. He says, Musiala holds the ball too much and doesn't know when to pass or dribble. Wow, Husseini. You, my friend. You, my friend, have come up with the controversial opinion of the day, I believe. And you know what? You're welcome to it. You have every right to have that opinion, and I'm not knocking it at all. I don't hold the same opinion entirely. I will agree with you on the last point a little bit. You said he doesn't even know when to pass or dribble. I disagree, but I do think he's still 20 years old, and I do believe Jamal Musiala is still working out when to make the best decisions for his team. I think we're seeing moments of that last season especially. There were times he was very selfish, and there were times he was very selfless. And rarely was that wrong. But I will agree with you. There are times that he takes one dribble too many, where he could maybe look for the pass. But I think with a player like Jamal Musiala, you've got to give him that freedom, right? You've got to give him that freedom to try and run at players and maybe run himself into a corridor. You've got to give him the freedom to try and be selfish and not always selfless in that role. Now, Müller is an incredible player, and if you heard earlier, I was asked who my favourite Bayern players were, and Thomas Müller was the second player I mentioned, behind Jamal Musiala. But Thomas Müller can't be the player that Thomas Müller used to be for Bayern anymore. He's still incredibly fit. He takes really good care of his body, mentally sharp, one of the best leaders on a pitch as well. They call him Radio Müller here in Munich. But I don't think Müller can expect to be starting every game ahead of Musiala at his age right now. And I don't think Thomas Tuchel sees it that way either. The customary, if we have a bingo list for a live training session here with Bayern, well, Thomas Müller sitting on a football needs to be on that bingo list. Maybe that's something we have to create in the future to see which ones we can tick off. Thomas Müller cracking a joke, that would also be on that list as well. But Husseini, again, I thank you. I thank you for writing in. I thank you for sharing your opinion. I personally don't agree with it. But I do agree with the fact that Musiala is still learning, the fact that he's not the complete product yet. He's not the complete player, and sometimes he makes the wrong decision. I do. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. And so, yeah, Grant just actually said it really well. That's a hot take, but I see where you're coming from. And so, I think that's the best way to put it. But let's be honest, Jamal Musiala is the future of this club. My goodness. I mean, what he's able to produce already at such a young age, and the confidence he plays with, the expectation levels he has of himself. I think this is something that maybe surprised me with Jamal Musiala the most, is that there were a couple of times I was at the Allianz Arena last season, and you'd see him walking through the corridors after the game, and he'd be actually genuinely a little grumpy and a little upset. And that's because he holds himself to such high standards. He wants perfection from himself out on a football pitch. And I think that mentality already at 20 years of age shows you that he's going to be such a big player for Bayern in the future. He is constantly striving to improve and do better. He's constantly expecting more of himself. And while he maybe does himself down in that regard, in the fact that he's maybe kind of beating himself up a little bit more than he needs to, that type of mentality will see you succeed at a club like Bayern. That type of mentality is almost required to succeed at a club like Bayern. And we've seen many talented players come to Munich that don't have that required mentality, and they don't quite make the breakthrough despite being very talented at a young age. And, I think we could say that about Matthijs Tel as well, because he's showing that same type of fortitude. Because I like the fact that he, was such a bit part player last season, but he seemed to relish the opportunities he got when he came out on the pitch. He always looked to make a quick impact. He was always ambitious on the ball. Bit of a high challenge there on, I think that was Joshua Kimmich, if he's still wearing that fluorescent bib. As a result, just a few sharp intakes of breath there around the training ground. Joshua Kimmich, I'm sure we'll have a few words for Eric Maxim Choupo-Moting at some point as well, because that's the last thing you want to see in these training sessions, is someone get injured, especially someone as important as Joshua Kimmich. You can see, not moving freely, is he? Still a bit of a grimace on the face. But Grant also is pointing out here that the issue with Jamal Musiala is that he's still young and still learning. Kind of reiterates my point. Daniel saying, wait, Pavard is in training with the team? I thought he is Inter Milan banned. Well, again, we don't like to talk about speculation here. What I can tell you is what the German press are reporting is that a deal has been struck. But as you can see, Benjamin Pavard is still training with Bayern. And I think the key here is that you know what? I'll go out on a limb. I don't think Bayern will let Pavard go unless they have a replacement ready to sign. And I think that might be the issue. That might be the final hurdle for that deal. Otherwise, I think Bayern will happily accept keeping Pavard here and letting his contract run out and him leaving on a free next summer. Because he has made it clear that he does want to leave the club. Tuchel has talked about that in the public sphere as well. But he's also the type of player that has proven that even if he stays at Bayern, he'll still produce to his highest level. And I think Pavard, there's no doubt about it, is a very good defender. And I think we've seen that throughout his time with the German record title holders. Grant comes in with another great question. Who's going to be the better Bayern veteran turned coach? Xabi Alonso or Thomas Müller? That's a great question. Now, this is it. Thomas Müller's talked about going into coaching, Grant, in his post-career. I don't think Thomas Müller's a head coach. I would happily be proven wrong. But I think Thomas Müller's someone that you want on your coaching staff, but I don't think he necessarily would want to be the head coach. I don't think he wants to be the man in the spotlight. It doesn't strike me that way. He's okay being there, don't get me wrong, but I don't think he would seek it out. And that's why I think Xabi Alonso really might be the better head coach, because I think Thomas Müller would be a great coach, but Xabi Alonso clearly has what it takes to be a head coach. And what he's doing with Bayer Leverkusen is very impressive. And I'm very excited, as I said earlier. I think their only problem is their goalkeeper, Lukas Radetzky, I'll be honest. I think he might be the weak point that costs them even more success this season, perhaps. Nathaniel getting in touch saying, much love from Malta, much love back. Says, what's your opinion about letting both Stanisic and Pavard go if he goes? And that's the point I just made. They've let Stanisic go, and that's a big, bold move. I don't think Bayern are going to let Pavard go as well unless they have someone lined up to step in. And I don't think they're going to be comfortable with maybe just having Noussair Mazraoui as, you know, your first choice right back, and then your only backup is Bouna Sarr. You know, and I'm not knocking Bouna Sarr, but that's not a lot of depth. And so, yeah, that's my opinion. Nathaniel, I think they won't let both go unless they've got someone lined up. There have been plenty of different names mentioned in the chat. And this is where I do have to apologise to the people in the chat. I do say that I love questions. I love the interaction. But we cannot discuss speculation here on this channel. It's just not possible, because anything here can be taken out of context as an official statement from a Bayern official. And I'm not a Bayern official. You know, I'm someone that works for them as a commentator, but things can be taken massively out of context, which is why we have to be very, very careful about discussing speculation and rumours. I do sometimes go into what's being reported in the German press because I feel like that's out in the open and I'm not making anything up myself, but we've got to be very careful about how we go about discussing certain things. And the passing is sharp, though, in training still, is to be expected. Matthijs de Ligt as vocal as ever, and something tells me he'll be back in the starting lineup for that game against Augsburg on Sunday. Even then, Matthijs de Ligt is disappointed about the defending. He really has been such a perfect fit for this club. Really good to see. I mean, it really does show you the pulling power of this Bayern team, right? There's been a lot made about their dominance in the Bundesliga. But the fact that you can attract a player like Matthijs de Ligt away from Juventus, the fact that you can attract a player like Harry Kane away from Tottenham, it goes to say volumes about the way Bayern are viewed in world football, the stature they hold and the respect they command ultimately as well. Connor asking, why is Tuchel sitting down? He's just sitting on the ball. Someone get him a chair. I can tell you, Connor, every live training session I've ever done when Bayern have had Thomas Tuchel in charge has featured him sitting on a ball at some point or another. It is a staple of these experiences. And it's clearly, as I said earlier, it'll be something we put on the bingo list if we ever do one for these live training sessions. And it would be fun to do one in the future at some point, because there's so many things that do happen on a regular basis that you could put in a bingo list. Thomas Tuchel sitting on a ball, Jamal Musiala nutmegging someone, Jamal Musiala going for a back heel, Thomas Muller making someone laugh, Bernie signing autographs, the mascot. There's so many that we could enjoy here. Imran's liking what he says, likes what he sees, saying that, wow, we're ready to play. This is it. Bayern are a side that have incredibly high expectations of themselves in training, not just out on the pitch when it gets competitive either. The demands on these players are up there with the highest in European and world football. You listen to them talk, you listen to the way they expect to deliver titles on a season-by-season basis. Nahanla, I hope I said that close to correctly, saying, finally it's my lunch break. Watching while working was not going so well. Well, I hope you can enjoy the live stream a little bit more now that you have hit lunchtime. Admittedly, we're approaching 12 o'clock midday here in Germany with these glorious conditions in Munich, and getting a little peckish myself. Whatever you do, don't tell me what you're eating, because it's only going to make me jealous. Lots of comments in the chat as well about Guerrero. Still unclear as to whether when he's going to be back to full fitness following the calf injury he suffered in pre-season. Such a shame for him as well, after signing on a free transfer from Borussia Dortmund, to suffer an injury so early on in his Bayern career. Player that has great experience of working with Thomas Tuchel. Guerrero is certainly capable of playing at left back. I'm not sure he's someone that I'd slot in at right back necessarily, but as someone was just pointing out in the chat, Royal, the fact that Lima can play in that position as well, and that is worth noting actually, that you're right, Konrad Laimer has in the past played at right back for Leipzig, and maybe as a last-ditch solution would be opted for in those roles, because, you know, again, other people are pointing out Ayush and Royal, pointing out that Kimmich can also be used at right back. And I just don't think that's something that Thomas Tuchel really wants to do. I think he's admitted that he knows that Kimmich can play there, but it would take a lot, I reckon, for Thomas Tuchel